trees are a great drawing subject, though they often have difficulties for people. I think the trick is to not think of them as a tree, not think of them as something that we are very familiar with, and simply to look at this object that we want to capture the effect of and seek to create marks and lines and combination of these that create the effect, that create the values, to particularly see them in terms of lights and darks, more so than of lines. You can see me starting with my 0.1 millimeter pen, doing a bit of a dotted outline. Now, I find this level of dotting quite a good one because I can change things almost continuously as I adjust and modify what I've done, and any marks that I don't use for the original purpose don't seem to matter at the end. They're not really apparent at the end of the drawing. But what I'm trying to do is to capture the major clumps of foliage that I can see. Now, I could just do any combination of clumps of foliage in the canopy, and in a sense no one's going to particularly know. It's not like the front of a well-known building. But if I've chosen to draw a particular tree because I like it, I'm probably not going to improve its appearance by changing continuously what I see. In fact, there's every chance I'll get things out of balance. And so the best chance of a great result is to do our best, I think, to capture the tree that we have in front of us. However, having said that, trees are quite forgiving subjects if things are not quite right. So the first thing I'm trying to do now is, having done this sort of dotted underdrawing, if you like, of the approximate clumps of foliage, is to start to add the values. Now, this is just my first take at adding values, but I'm trying to now define more clearly the foliage that's in sunlight, or at least even the foliage on our side of the tree, as opposed to foliage on the other side of the tree, the far side of the tree. And it's very important to distinguish between the two. On this tree is so dense with leaf canopy that we don't see that much of the canopy on the other side. But if this was, say, an Australian eucalypt, where there is a lot less foliage and there are more clumps with more space between, then we do see through the tree. And it's really important to distinguish, particularly if we're using a photo where depth isn't as obvious. It's important to distinguish what foliage is on the far side of the tree, because we want to treat that differently to the foliage that's closer to help create a 360-degree sense of the tree's form and depth. But for now, continuing with this to work out exactly what's what. Now, you might be tempted to think at this stage, I don't need to watch the rest of this because it's just going to be more of this. And that's true, and it's not true. It's true in that there is a lot more of this because, well, if we want to draw a tree and if we want to capture the effect of a tree, and particularly if we're using a 0.1 millimeter black fine liner, then there are a lot of marks and lines we have to make. But it's not true in the sense of there are things we do in the second half of the drawing that I can't obviously demonstrate or talk about until we get to the second half. So if you're really interested in improving your ability to draw trees and to understand the process to really capture the full feel and effect of a tree, then I do suggest that you persevere with this. This drawing took me about 50 minutes to draw in real time, which went really fast, which I think just goes to show how enjoyable an experience drawing a tree can be. Now, you can see that I don't think about branches until I've really established most of the canopy. And even then, I only start to draw the branches that are going to get in the way of canopy on the far side. But you can see now what I've done by drawing in the canopy, then drawing the branches starting at the top and working down. It's so much easier for me to accurately get the width of the branches correct. I don't fall into that trap that I so often see of starting at the ground and working up with thick trunks and thick branches that then don't have enough space to thin down before they get to the edge of the leaf canopy. So very helpful to do it the other way round. If perchance the tree isn't the main subject, and so we've already started with other objects, then the way I would do it then would be to start in the center of the tree with foliage still, and then work down to wherever the ground level is, and then work up. I find that still helps me to judge the thickness a lot better. So I'm doing lots of hatching to indicate various levels of darkness, of value. And at the moment, I'm keeping it fairly, I was going to say black and white, but I'm really doing the darkest areas of shade and shadow versus the lightest areas. But later on, I'm going to start to do light hatching over a lot of the highlighted areas that are still highlighted now, but in the tree aren't as highlighted. So there's still light bouncing off them, but not, if you like, the most direct light. And so in other words, we start to create a greater subtlety of the surface, which brings it more and more into a three-dimensional feel, which is what we want. We want the sense of this tree curving away from us on both sides and on the top, and also of the trunk sitting further back. So while I've outlined the trunk and some of the branches, I'm going back to the foliage, because it's the foliage that really needs our attention. Certainly in a tree such as this with such a full canopy. Now notice I'm using negative space to pop out some of the branches by establishing some foliage on the far side of the tree, which is going to be in shadow from our perspective. I'm able to make the branches stand out more so even than in the photo, which is very helpful. Now I do hatch those branches. I don't leave them as white because that would be too bright. That would not make sense with the direction of the sun and the form of the tree. But if you just wait a bit longer, you'll see how I treat the branches so that I establish the darker value but don't lose the clarity of them. It's always the challenge of creating enough lines to create effect, but then to put them on the paper, to put our marks on the paper so that we can still distinguish between one thing and another. Often in life, colour helps us do that. When we're drawing in just black and white, then we need to work that ourselves with a little more subtlety. And so I'm starting to pay particular attention to the upper definition of these canopies to make sure it's not too much of a smooth line, that there are little bumps and whatnot. But the important thing, or one of the important things with a big tree, is that I don't start to draw leaves. As soon as we see leaves, or as soon as we see marks that we take as being leaves, then we start to make judgments about the size of the tree, which for a tree this enormous is bound to make it a lot smaller because we can't see the individual leaves. And so I don't want to create a leaf shape or a leaf mark. I need to draw the canopy as a whole and not start to fall into marks for little parts that I know are there because I know these are leaves, but if I'm honest, I really can't see them as individual. And so this is where I need to observe and draw what I'm seeing, not what I think I'm seeing, or not what I'm remembering seeing, or not what a part of me knows is there and that I would see more clearly if I were closer. So it's keeping the overall mass worked at the same level as a single form, not as millions of leaves collected together. Now, I'm trying again approximately to follow the trunks and the branches without getting too het up over it. But they're big trees, they're thick trunks, and they're going to the ground nicely. Now, I'm going to add some context to this, but I'm not going to make it the streetscape that we see here. I had planned to originally, but I thought these trees looked so noble standing here in all their glory as I got towards the end that I decided to make them more the star event. Now you'll see I'm using hatch lines horizontally on the trunks because the actual, if you like, defining marks on the trees, the tree trunks and branches are vertical lines. If I add more vertical lines to them to create value, they're going to merge with the outline lines, with the edging lines. And that doesn't matter if there's nothing around it so much, but where you have a number of them close together, then it starts to, again, stop us seeing things as clearly as we might otherwise see them. So doing them horizontally gives me a nice contrast. Now I am doing this hedge that's close by. Now I thought this was very helpful to include this because it comes really close to us. So now I do want to do marks that look like individual leaves, and I hope you can see the difference that it creates when we do. Because now we know this is close because it's clearly not particularly large, and hopefully we can recognize that it's a hedge. I kept feeling that it was some sort of farmyard animal sort of nosing around on the ground looking for something to eat, which was a bit off-putting as I drew it. I kept trying to make it look more like a hedge and less like a farm animal, but anyway. And I'll come back to that and add some more value to make it darker and to come forward. But because now this hedge sits in the foreground, it's the first thing we see. And now we have to look past it. We have to travel some distance past it to see this enormous tree in the background. So in terms of scale and distance, it helps the tree look further away, but also larger. And I think it's always good if we can draw our scene so that we draw the viewer in and give it a good sense of depth. So you can see now that I'm still going over, I'm doing some horizontal lines now for some of the larger branches that we have, and I'm still going back, and I'm adding more variation in the darks and the lights to create a softer three-dimensional form. And that's why my initial hatching marks weren't very dark. They were fairly loosely spaced because I knew I wasn't going to go over all of those hatched areas with the same amount of value. That some I would darken and some I would leave at that, and some I would come over the top cross-hatching. It's all about creating variation of our marks and looking at our reference and saying which parts of the tree's canopy are lighter but still shaded in some degree or still shadowed in some degree by the branches above, because I want to put some very light hatching over those as well, even if they're lighter than other parts. And then I decide that I'm going to create a dark shrubby bush on the far side of the tree just to help pop the tree forward and also to show the base of the tree a little bit more. And now I can add some more hatching as well. So all in all, it's been a wonderful experience. I hope you have a go. Please hit the like button. I'll post this tree photo on my channel community page if you'd like to have a go. It's a good thing to do a subject such as this when we can sit down and give it some time. Have a cup of coffee, put some nice music on, and spend an hour drawing a tree and really capturing the effect and trying to get the delicacy of it as well as the strength. To use lots of small marks, not try to do too much too quickly, but do it continuously. And let the shape appear slowly and then fine-tune it, if you like, as we work on it. Start to slow down, and when we get towards the end, and really add just a couple more darks to make the variation between the lightest and the darkest areas even greater. So I'm just darkening this hedge a little bit more, wishing I didn't have a 0.1 millimeter pen for that. And now just a little bit more of the background foliage that's on the other side of the trunks. And I think we're pretty much done. Showing a few more leaves here. It's important to know when to stop. I think I finished the tree, and there we have it. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. I do hope you give it a go. Trees don't have to be the difficulty that we so often think they are. It's all in the way we think and in the marks we use. So don't be put off doing this if you struggle with trees. This is how we learn, and this is a great example to learn with. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, leaves or not, make sure you have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye.